I dropped out of college with zero business experience, and now own 4 properties worth over $2 million. Meanwhile, my friend with 2 master's degrees is still renting and living paycheck to paycheck. What's the difference between us? It's not what you think. In this video, I'm breaking down the surprising truth about why seemingly average people often build wealth faster than the smartest people in the room. If you've ever wondered why your intelligence isn't translating to financial success, you're about to discover exactly what's been holding you back. Meet Angela, the college dropout who built a real estate empire. Have you ever wondered how someone with no formal business education can own multiple properties while your educated friends struggle to pay rent? Let me introduce you to Angela, a 29-year-old who's built an impressive real estate portfolio that might make you question everything you think you know about success and intelligence. Angela was just like many of you, a nursing student with big dreams and mounting student debt. But in her second year, she made a decision that horrified her parents and confused her friends. She dropped out, leaving behind the security of a guaranteed career path and walking away with $15,000 in student loans and absolutely no plan B. Everyone thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life, Angela recalls. Her parents couldn't understand why she'd abandoned a stable career path, especially since her older brother had just landed a great hospital job after finishing his medical degree. Meanwhile, her college friends continued on their predictable paths, studying, graduating, and landing those coveted entry-level positions with benefits packages and retirement plans. But Angela saw something they didn't. While working part-time at a coffee shop, she noticed a small, help wanted sign in the window of a local property management company. Instead of just applying for the office position, she proposed something different to the owner. She'd work as an on-site property manager in exchange for reduced rent at one of their buildings. This unconventional arrangement became Angela's real-world education. She learned how to handle maintenance requests, screen tenants, and manage property finances, all skills that would have cost thousands in formal education. She was essentially getting paid to learn the business from the inside. During those 2 years as a property manager, Angela didn't just learn, she saved. Living with reduced rent meant she could put away about 40% of her income, even while making coffee shop wages. She worked overtime shifts and picked up gig work on weekends, sometimes putting in 60-hour weeks. But unlike her friends who were spending their extra money on brunches and trips, Angela was building her first investment fund. What made her approach different was how she used her evenings. While her friends were binging Netflix after work, Angela was studying local real estate listings, attending property auctions just to observe, and building relationships with local contractors who taught her how to estimate renovation costs. She wasn't just saving money. She was developing market intelligence that would prove invaluable. After 2 years, Angela had saved $22,000, nowhere near the recommended 20% down payment for homes in her area. But instead of waiting to reach that perfect number, she found a distressed property that the bank was eager to unload. Using an FHA loan that required just 3.5% down, she purchased her first property, a dated duplex that needed significant work but had solid bones. I lived in one half of the duplex while renovating the other side on evenings and weekends, Angela explains. I did whatever I could myself, painting, basic plumbing, tile work, and only hired professionals for electrical and major structural issues. 6 months later, she rented out the renovated side for enough to cover nearly 80% of her mortgage. The magic happened just 18 months after her first purchase. With her property now fully renovated and generating rental income, Angela had built enough equity to secure a home equity line of credit. She used this to make a down payment on her second property, a small single-family home near a growing commercial area. Angela's unconventional approach to real estate continued to pay off. Within 7 years of dropping out of nursing school, her portfolio had grown to 4 properties with a combined value of over $2 million. Meanwhile, many of her former classmates were still paying off student loans and saving for their first homes. So what's the lesson here? Waiting for the perfect financial plan might be costing you thousands. Angela's story shows us that imperfect action beats perfect planning every time. She didn't have a flawless strategy, an inheritance, or even a complete education. What she had was the willingness to start before she felt ready and learn through direct experience rather than theoretical knowledge. The action advantage. Why doing beats thinking. While Angela jumped into action with incomplete information, her college roommate Emma, armed with 2 prestigious master's degrees, is still researching the perfect investment strategy 5 years later. The difference in their bank accounts isn't about who's smarter, but rather about something psychologists call analysis paralysis. And it might be the missing piece in your financial puzzle. Analysis paralysis isn't just a catchy phrase. It's a psychological phenomenon that disproportionately affects highly intelligent people. When you have the cognitive capacity to consider multiple angles and outcomes, making decisions becomes exponentially more difficult. For financially savvy women especially, this overthinking trap can completely halt progress. Let's look at Emma's situation more closely. With master's degrees in business and economics, she understands market fundamentals, can calculate risk-adjusted returns, and can explain modern portfolio theory in her sleep. Yet at 30, Emma has $42,000 sitting in a savings account earning minimal interest while she researches the optimal investment strategy. She's been doing this research for 5 years now. What's happening here? Emma operates on what decision scientists call a maximizer mindset. She won't make a move until she's 99% certain it's the absolute best option. Meanwhile, Angela functions as a satisficer. Once she has about 70% of the information and feels the decision is good enough, she acts. This difference in decision velocity creates dramatic financial outcomes over time. While Emma waits for perfect certainty, Angela makes moves, learns from results, and adjusts course. A study from the University of California found that entrepreneurs who make faster decisions with incomplete information typically outperform their more analytical counterparts by a significant margin, not because they're luckier, but because they engage in more learning cycles. Angela's approach embraces what business strategists call affordable mistakes, small, recoverable errors that provide valuable feedback without catastrophic consequences. When her first duplex renovation went over budget by $7,000, she didn't spiral into regret. She adjusted her strategy for the next property by getting more precise contractor quotes and adding a 15% contingency buffer. While Angela was making and learning from these small mistakes, Emma remained completely out of the market. Between 2016 and 2021, when Angela was building her portfolio, the S&P 500 increased by approximately 103%. Even a basic index fund investment would have nearly doubled Emma's $42,000, but her quest for the perfect investment strategy kept her sidelined. Let's put this in concrete numbers. If both women had $25,000 to invest in 2016, Angela's imperfect but action-oriented approach in real estate grew her initial capital to approximately $220,000 in equity by 2021. Emma's analysis-paralyzed approach left her with the same $25,000 plus minimal interest, about $26,500. That's a $193,500 difference, not because of intelligence, but because of action velocity. Psychology professor Barry Schwartz, who studies decision-making behavior, explains that maximizers like Emma often end up less satisfied with their decisions despite putting in more effort. They're plagued by the nagging thought that a better option exists, creating a perpetual cycle of research without action. What's particularly interesting is how this pattern affects different aspects of Emma's financial life. She's not just hesitant about investments. She also takes months to decide on insurance policies, delays opening tax-advantaged accounts because she's researching the best options, and has 3 different budgeting systems she's trying to perfect before fully implementing any of them. The wealth gap between Angela and Emma ultimately comes down to a simple truth. Imperfect action compounds over time, while perfect planning remains theoretical. Angela's good enough decisions, made promptly with adequate information, created real-world results that could be improved upon. Emma's theoretical perfect decisions never had the chance to create any results at all. The Dunning-Kruger effect, when confidence beats competence. The wealth gap between Angela and Emma reveals something fascinating about our psychology that might seem completely backward. Have you ever noticed how beginners sometimes charge ahead with confidence while experts hesitate? This cognitive phenomenon has a name in psychology, and understanding it could transform your relationship with money. Let me introduce you to the Dunning-Kruger effect. This psychological principle explains how people with limited knowledge in a field often overestimate their abilities, while experts become painfully aware of everything they don't know. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger discovered that as we learn more about a complex subject, our confidence initially drops before gradually rebuilding on a more solid foundation. This creates an interesting confidence gap in financial decision-making. Beginners don't see all the potential pitfalls, which paradoxically gives them the courage to take action, while experts get trapped in their knowledge. It's like standing at the edge of a swimming pool. The person who doesn't know how deep it is jumps right in, while the person who knows all the dangers hesitates on the edge. Research from behavioral economics backs this up. A 2019 study from the Journal of Behavioral Finance examined how market knowledge affected investment decisions during uncertain conditions. The findings were surprising. Participants with moderate market knowledge made more profitable investment choices than those with extensive expertise. The experts became overly cautious, constantly second-guessing themselves and missing opportunities while waiting for perfect conditions. This explains part of Angela's success in real estate. Her limited understanding of traditional investment rules meant she wasn't constrained by them. When conventional wisdom suggested waiting until she had a 20% down payment or avoiding risky neighborhoods, Angela's partial knowledge allowed her to explore unconventional approaches that ultimately worked in her favor. Meanwhile, Emma's extensive financial education made her hyper-aware of everything that could possibly go wrong. She understood market volatility, recession risks, tax implications, and countless other factors so thoroughly that each potential investment seemed fraught with danger. Every decision became paralyzed by her ability to visualize all the potential negative outcomes. This pattern shows up repeatedly among successful entrepreneurs. Consider Brian Chesky, who co-founded Airbnb despite having no background in hospitality or tech. When asked about their early success, Chesky admitted, "If we had known all the challenges we would face, we might never have started." His limited awareness of industry barriers allowed him to reimagine hospitality entirely. Similarly, Sarah Blakely launched Spanx with no experience in retail, manufacturing, or patents. She's often said that her lack of industry knowledge was actually beneficial. "I didn't know how things were supposed to be done, so I did them my way." Her unconventional approaches to product development and marketing stemmed directly from not knowing the rules she was breaking. What's particularly interesting is how this ignorance advantage naturally diminishes over time. As entrepreneurs gain expertise, they must find ways to maintain their beginner's mindset or risk becoming overly cautious. This creates a sweet spot for taking action. Enough knowledge to make informed decisions, but not so much that you become paralyzed by possibilities. This doesn't mean education is worthless, far from it. But it does suggest that perfect knowledge shouldn't be a prerequisite for taking action. In fact, waiting until you feel fully prepared might be the very thing holding you back from building wealth. So how do cognitive biases actually help some people get rich? Sometimes, not seeing every obstacle means you'll actually begin the journey. There's a certain freedom in limited knowledge that allows for bold action, creative problem solving, and the willingness to try approaches that experts might dismiss. The person who doesn't see all the reasons something might fail is often the one who finds unexpected ways to succeed. Meet Mike, the C student who built a 7-figure business. While Emma was analyzing investment strategies, people like Mike were quietly building wealth empires from the ground up. Remember those kids in school who couldn't sit still and got average grades? Turns out, the same traits that made school challenging for Mike, his ADHD, his practical thinking, his disinterest in theoretical concepts, became his secret weapons in building a 7-figure landscaping business that outperforms many MBA-driven startups. Meet Mike, a 34-year-old entrepreneur who struggled through high school with C grades and an ADHD diagnosis that had teachers constantly frustrated. His guidance counselor actually sat him down junior year and said, "College probably isn't for you, Mike. Have you considered a trade?" What was meant as a limiting statement became the unexpected launching pad for his financial success. "Everyone was so focused on what I couldn't do that they missed what I could do," Mike recalls. While his classmates were filling out college applications, Mike was already running a weekend lawn service for neighbors. Not because he had entrepreneurial dreams, but simply because he couldn't stand sitting still and liked working outdoors. After graduation, Mike expanded his lawn service while his friends headed off to university. He noticed something his competitors missed. In affluent neighborhoods, homeowners weren't just looking for someone to cut grass. They wanted comprehensive property care without the hassle of managing multiple services. "I saw that these homeowners had money but no time. They didn't want to call one person for mowing. another for fertilizing, and someone else for seasonal plantings. They wanted one number to call for everything, Mike explains. What's fascinating is how Mike's ADHD, a condition that caused him to fail tests and miss homework deadlines, transformed into his business superpower. The hyperfocus that made him tune out boring lectures allowed him to obsess over lawn equipment specifications, landscape design trends, and property management systems. Where others saw tedious details, Mike saw patterns and opportunities. When I'm interested in something, I can focus for 12 hours straight. I'll research every angle, talk to every expert, try every approach until I figure it out, he says. This intense focus helped him master technical aspects of landscaping that many competitors with formal training overlooked. Rather than creating complex business plans or sophisticated marketing campaigns, Mike built his company on a remarkably simple foundation: exceptional reliability and personal service. I answer my phone. I show up when I say I will. I remember the names of my clients' kids and dogs. That stuff matters more than fancy brochures, he explains. His growth strategy was equally straightforward. While business school graduates might emphasize scaling quickly and seeking outside investment, Mike took a measured approach. He only purchased new equipment after saving the full amount. He hired slowly, bringing on just 1 or 2 people a year. He expanded his service area only when his team could handle the additional work without compromising quality. I don't understand complicated spreadsheets, but I know exactly how much money comes in and how much goes out every month. That's really all that matters, Mike says. This simplified financial approach meant he avoided the debt traps that sank many of his more educated competitors who over-leveraged their businesses with expensive equipment and aggressive expansion plans. Today, Mike's company employs 30 people and generates over $1.2 million in annual revenue. His profit margins consistently outperform industry averages, and he receives multiple buyout offers each year. Meanwhile, several of his former classmates with business degrees work for corporations where they earn less than Mike's crew supervisors. The most revealing part of Mike's story isn't just what he achieved, but what he lacked. No business degree, no fancy vocabulary, no complex financial models, no venture capital. Instead, he succeeded through hyper-responsiveness to customer needs, practical problem-solving, and a straightforward approach to money management that avoided unnecessary complications. The learning loop: why street smarts beat book smarts. What if everything you've been taught about learning is actually slowing down your path to wealth? Mike's lack of formal education wasn't a handicap. It became his secret advantage in the real world, creating tight feedback loops that accelerated his business growth beyond what any textbook could teach. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to get rich, but whether you're learning in ways that actually build wealth. Let's look at a revealing contrast. While Mike was growing his landscaping business, James, an MBA graduate with impressive academic credentials, started a competing landscape company in the same city. On paper, James should have dominated the market. He had studied business strategy, marketing principles, and operational efficiency. He could talk confidently about customer acquisition costs and lifetime value metrics. Yet 3 years in, James was barely breaking even while Mike continued to thrive. The difference wasn't intelligence, it was how they learned. Mike operated on what business researchers call rapid experiential learning cycles. When he noticed customers asking about seasonal flower rotations, he didn't commission a market research study. Instead, he added the service for 10 customers, tracked their satisfaction, adjusted his pricing, and rolled it out broadly within weeks. By the time James finished analyzing whether to offer the same service, Mike had already completed 3 iterations and locked in loyal customers. Research from the Harvard Business School shows that entrepreneurs who use this experiential, iterative approach outperform those who rely primarily on analytical planning by as much as 40% in the early years of business growth. The study tracked 380 small business owners and found that those who completed at least 8 learning loops per quarter showed dramatically better revenue growth than those who averaged 2 or fewer. Mike's approach to learning also gave him crucial market intelligence that James completely missed. While James analyzed industry reports and conducted formal surveys, Mike was having daily conversations with actual customers. When a client mentioned in passing that they hated dealing with holiday light installation, Mike immediately spotted an opportunity. Within a month, he had added a seasonal service that eventually generated 18% of his annual revenue. an insight that never appeared in any of the industry reports James studied. There are things you can only know by doing the work, explains Dr. Catherine Hartley, who studies experiential learning at New York University. We call this tacit knowledge, the kind that can't be easily communicated through writing or lecture. This tacit knowledge became Mike's competitive edge. He knew exactly how long specific jobs would take because he'd done them himself. He understood which equipment broke down most frequently because he'd repaired it. He recognized which customers would be receptive to upselling because he'd built relationships with them. James, despite his sophisticated understanding of business theory, lacked this essential hands-on knowledge. Perhaps most interesting was how Mike learned from his entire organization. While James maintained a traditional management hierarchy, Mike regularly rotated through different roles in his company. He spent days working alongside his crews, asking questions and absorbing their perspectives. This gave Mike operational insights that James missed entirely. James's crew members noticed that certain tools were inefficient for particular properties, but this feedback never reached James. Meanwhile, Mike's willingness to learn from employees at all levels led to equipment modifications that improved efficiency by 23% on larger properties. These improvements directly translated to higher profit margins, allowing Mike to outbid James while actually making more money on each job. What makes this pattern so important is that it appears consistently across different industries and education levels. A 2021 study of financial advisors found that those who actively tested different approaches with clients and adapted quickly ultimately built more successful practices than advisors with superior academic credentials who relied primarily on theoretical knowledge. School dropouts who become wealthy understand something crucial. Real-world testing creates faster, more relevant learning than theoretical study ever could. They're not succeeding despite their lack of formal education. In many cases, they're succeeding precisely because they weren't trained to overthink decisions or wait for perfect information. The social intelligence factor, relationships as currency. Beyond Mike's practical approach to learning existed another advantage that traditional education completely overlooked. In a world where we're taught that knowledge equals power, Mike discovered that who you know and how they feel about you creates a form of wealth that no amount of book learning can replace. While James approached new clients with polished presentations and industry credentials, Mike built his business through genuine connections. At local business gatherings, James would distribute professional brochures highlighting his MBA and industry certifications. Mike, meanwhile, remembered personal details about everyone he met, asking about their children by name, following up on previous conversations, and creating authentic relationships before even mentioning his services. This fundamental difference became clear when the city's most prestigious neighborhood association was selecting a landscaping service. James submitted a comprehensive proposal with detailed market analysis and professional references. Mike had spent months building relationships with 3 key board members through community events. When decision time came, the board chair told Mike, "Your proposal wasn't the most sophisticated, but we know and trust you." That single contract increased Mike's revenue by 35% and led to dozens of referrals. Mike's relationship-first approach extended to suppliers too. When a nationwide shortage of commercial-grade fertilizer threatened to disrupt spring services, James faced weeks of delays. Mike, however, received a call from his supplier. "I'm holding back some inventory for a few special customers. Come by Thursday." This wasn't favoritism. It was the result of Mike consistently paying invoices early, remembering the supplier's birthday, and once helping his delivery driver change a flat tire in the rain. Research from the Harvard Business Review confirms this isn't just anecdotal. A 5-year study of entrepreneurial success factors found that the strength of a founder's professional relationships correlated more strongly with business growth than educational background, startup capital, or even industry experience. The researchers concluded that social capital consistently outperforms intellectual capital in predicting business sustainability. What's particularly interesting is how Mike's social intelligence manifested in his product development. While James conducted formal market research surveys, Mike simply listened during casual conversations with clients. When several homeowners mentioned struggling with landscape lighting, Mike didn't just see a problem, he heard an opportunity. He developed a simple, user-friendly lighting system that addressed specific frustrations clients had mentioned. This offering quickly became his highest margin service, despite never appearing in any market research report. The contrast extended to employee relationships as well. James maintained professional distance from his team, conducting formal quarterly reviews and implementing standardized training programs. Mike invited employees to family barbecues, remembered their anniversaries, and mentored promising team members. When a competing company tried to poach staff with higher wages, Mike's entire team stayed loyal. One supervisor explained, "James runs a company. Mike built a family." This relationship-centered approach created tangible financial advantages that don't appear in business textbooks. Mike's customer acquisition costs were 62% lower than industry averages because 78% of new clients came through personal referrals. His accounts receivable averaged just 11 days versus the industry's 47 days because clients prioritized paying someone they considered a friend. And his employee turnover rate of 8% compared to the industry average of 34% saved thousands in training and recruitment costs annually. Dr. Vanessa Bones, a Cornell University professor who studies social influence, explains, "We consistently underestimate the role of social connections in economic outcomes. Educational credentials signal competence, but relationships establish trust, and people ultimately do business with those they trust." James eventually hired a business coach who advised him to focus less on credentials and more on connections. 2 years later, meet Lisa, the teacher who became a millionaire on a modest salary. While James learned the hard way about the power of relationships, a completely different success story was quietly unfolding in an elementary school across town. Meet Lisa Thompson, a third-grade teacher who built a 7-figure nest egg on a modest educator's salary. When Lisa started teaching at 22, her starting salary was just $45,000. Now at 40, despite never earning more than $65,000 annually, she's amassed a net worth exceeding $1.2 million. What makes her story even more remarkable is that she accomplished this without inheriting wealth, marrying rich, or hitting the startup lottery. Her colleague Jennifer offers a stark contrast. Both women graduated from the same teaching program, started at the same school in the same year, and earned nearly identical salaries throughout their careers. Yet today, Jennifer has less than $30,000 saved for retirement and struggles to stay ahead of her credit card bills. "Most financial advisors told me I was crazy when I first laid out my plan," Lisa recalls. "They said a new teacher should save 10 to 15% at most. When I insisted on automatically investing 30% of every paycheck, one advisor actually refused to work with me, saying I was setting myself up for failure." Lisa ignored that advice and set up direct deposits that whisked nearly a third of her income into investments before she could touch it. "Living on 70% of my income became my normal because I never saw that money in the first place," she explains. You can't miss what you never had. 3 years into her teaching career, Lisa made another unconventional move. While her colleagues were buying single-family starter homes, she purchased a duplex in a neighborhood near their school. She lived in the smaller unit and rented the larger one to a family, covering about 75% of her mortgage payment. "Everyone thought I was crazy to become a landlord in my 20s, Lisa says. But that decision accelerated my wealth building more than anything else I've done. My housing costs were dramatically lower than my peers, and I was building equity in an asset that generated income." Lisa's investment approach was remarkably straightforward. Rather than trying to pick winning stocks or time market movements, she consistently invested in low-cost index funds that tracked the broader market. "I've watched colleagues get excited about hot stock tips or pull money out when markets get scary. Meanwhile, I just kept my automatic contributions flowing every month, regardless of what the markets were doing." This simple strategy paid off substantially. One of her colleagues, Robert, who prided himself on his stock-picking prowess, has seen his portfolio grow to around $320,000 after 18 years of teaching. Lisa's portfolio, with similar contributions but a steady hands-off approach, has grown to over $780,000. Lisa also leveraged her teaching schedule to create additional income. "Summers and after-school hours gave me time to build a tutoring business that brought in about $10,000 extra each year," she explains. "Every dollar of that side income went directly into investments. I never let lifestyle inflation eat away those earnings." What's particularly fascinating about Lisa's approach is that she viewed her student loans as good debt. While many of her colleagues stressed about paying off their education loans as quickly as possible, Lisa made minimum payments while directing her resources toward investments with higher returns. My student loans had a 4.5% interest rate, but my investments have averaged about 8% returns over time, she explains. Mathematically, it made more sense to invest extra dollars rather than rush to pay off low-interest debt. Those student loans actually enabled me to build a career that supported my wealth-building strategy. Lisa's path didn't require financial genius or complex strategies, just consistency, automation, and the willingness to make decisions that sometimes went against conventional wisdom. She lived comfortably but intentionally, aligning her spending with her values rather than societal expectations. The power of constraints, how limitations breed creativity. Behind Lisa's impressive wealth building wasn't an abundance of resources, but quite the opposite. When you have less to work with, you're forced to think differently. And that's precisely where the magic happens. Could your biggest financial constraint actually be your greatest wealth-building asset? While her colleague Jennifer would casually spend $150 on dinner without thinking twice, Lisa operated within clear boundaries that sparked creative solutions. Jennifer's approach was straightforward. When she needed something, she bought it. When bills piled up, she used credit cards. When she wanted to save more, she looked for ways to increase her income rather than examining her spending. This seemingly easier path led Jennifer to a cycle of consumption that kept her financial progress minimal. A fascinating 2019 study from Stanford University found that teams with resource constraints consistently produced more innovative solutions than teams with unlimited resources. The researchers called this the constraint advantage. When facing limitations, our brains activate different neural pathways that lead to more creative problem solving. This same principle applied to Lisa's financial life in remarkable ways. Take Lisa's approach to meal planning. Rather than ordering takeout multiple times a week like Jennifer, Lisa developed a system where she spent Sunday afternoons batch cooking. This single habit saved her approximately $4,800 annually, money that went straight into her investment accounts. What started as a budget necessity became a wealth-building superpower. Lisa's transportation choices tell a similar story. While her colleagues financed new cars every few years, Lisa maintained her reliable sedan for over a decade. The absence of a $500 monthly car payment allowed her to redirect an additional $6,000 annually into her investments. When the math was done, this single constraint-driven decision was worth over $150,000 in her portfolio over 10 years. Resource limitations also made Lisa exceptionally thoughtful about larger purchases. Before buying anything over $100, she implemented a 72-hour rule, putting the item on a waiting list and revisiting it 3 days later. This simple constraint eliminated roughly 80% of her impulse purchases. Jennifer, meanwhile, would frequently experience buyer's remorse over barely used kitchen gadgets and clothing items still sporting tags. Even Lisa's time constraints as a teacher worked in her favor. With limited hours to manage her finances between grading papers and lesson planning, she created automated systems that required minimal maintenance. Her investments ran on autopilot, bills were paid automatically, and financial decisions followed simple rules rather than requiring constant reconsideration. Jennifer, despite having similar time constraints, spent hours each month manually paying bills and frequently missed opportunities to invest because her system was too complicated. Perhaps most impressively, Lisa turned her housing constraint into her greatest financial advantage. Unable to afford a traditional single-family home in her preferred neighborhood, she discovered the concept of house hacking through a financial blog. By purchasing a duplex and renting out half, she effectively reduced her housing costs by 75% compared to Jennifer, who stretched her budget for a larger single-family home. This one constraint-driven solution accelerated Lisa's wealth building by nearly a decade. Dr. Elaine Eisenman, a researcher who studies successful entrepreneurs, explains, "Constraints force prioritization and focus. When resources are limited, we become ruthlessly efficient at identifying what truly matters." Lisa intuitively applied this principle to her personal finances, concentrating her resources on assets that appreciated rather than expenses that depreciated. Are you making your financial life too complicated? Lisa's journey reveals a counterintuitive truth. Constraints don't limit your wealth-building potential, they enhance it. By embracing boundaries rather than fighting them, Lisa discovered simpler, more effective strategies that her higher-earning friends missed entirely. Her modest teacher's salary wasn't an obstacle, but a catalyst that forced creative thinking and disciplined decision-making. The consistency compound, small actions, massive results. While Lisa's constraints sparked her creativity, there's something truly powerful about her financial success that often goes overlooked. It's not her investment picks or market timing skills. It's something so ordinary that most people dismiss it completely. The real secret to Lisa's millionaire status? Consistency, an unsexy, boring strategy that outperforms almost everything else. Let's compare how Lisa and Jennifer approached investing. Lisa set up automatic transfers of $1,000 each month into her index funds. Rain or shine, market up or down. Jennifer, meanwhile, preferred to wait for the perfect moment to invest, sometimes setting aside $5,000 or more for when the time felt right. She followed financial news closely, waiting for market dips or buying opportunities recommended by experts. The math tells the real story. Let's look at what happened when both started with $10,000 at age 25. Lisa's consistent $1,000 monthly investments for 15 years at an 8% average return grew to approximately $430,000. Jennifer, who invested $5,000 quarterly but often hesitated during market volatility, ended up with just $280,000 over the same period. The difference? Nearly $150,000. All because Lisa never tried to time the market. Financial researcher Dr. Angela Collins from the University of Michigan explains this phenomenon. Our 10-year study of 2,800 investors found that consistency was 3.4 times more predictive of wealth accumulation than investment knowledge, and 2.7 times more important than income level. This research confirms what Lisa discovered through experience. Showing up regularly beats showing up perfectly. Lisa used a psychological technique called habit stacking to maintain her consistency. She attached new financial habits to existing routines, reviewing her investments while drinking her Sunday morning coffee, networking with one new financial contact every time she graded papers, and dedicating 1 hour of tutoring income to her side business development each week. By linking these money moves to established habits, she eliminated the need for constant decision-making and willpower. During the 2008 financial crisis, this consistency proved invaluable. While Jennifer panicked and sold investments at a 32% loss, Lisa continued her automatic contributions, effectively buying shares at discount prices. When the market recovered, Lisa's portfolio bounced back dramatically, while Jennifer remained on the sidelines, afraid to re-enter until prices had already substantially recovered. The classic buy high, sell low trap that consistency helps avoid. What's particularly interesting is how Lisa's consistency compound effect extended beyond just her investment accounts. Her regular networking created a reliable stream of new tutoring clients. Her weekly skill development sessions led to creating specialized curriculum materials she could sell to other teachers. Her consistent side business attention allowed her to gradually scale without burnout. Each area benefited from the same principle: small, regular actions compounding over time. According to behavioral economist Dr. James Liu, the consistency compound works because it harnesses 3 psychological principles simultaneously: habit formation, loss aversion, and momentum building. The human brain is wired to recognize and reward patterns, which is why consistent behavior is actually easier to maintain than sporadic effort once established. Jennifer's approach seemed more exciting and dynamic on the surface. She could talk about market trends at dinner parties and had fascinating stories about her investment research. Lisa's approach: boring, automated, nothing to discuss. But 15 years later, Lisa's net worth tells the more compelling story. The wealth-building blueprint, common threads across all case studies. Behind the seemingly ordinary success stories of Angela, Mike, and Lisa lies a hidden blueprint that connects them all, despite their different backgrounds and industries. What's truly surprising isn't what these average wealth builders did differently from everyone else. It's what they all did exactly the same way, flying directly in the face of conventional financial wisdom. When you look closely at these 3 very different stories, a real estate entrepreneur, a landscaping business owner, and a teacher, a fascinating pattern emerges. While financial experts keep telling us we need advanced degrees, complex investment strategies, and sophisticated market knowledge, our three wealth builders share a completely different approach. First, they all embraced immediate action with incomplete information. In a world where we're constantly told to do our research and be fully prepared, Angela, Mike, and Lisa did something radical. They started before they felt ready. They didn't wait until they had perfect information or ideal circumstances. Instead, they moved forward with what they knew at the time, adjusting their course along the way. Second, notice how each of them learned primarily through hands-on experience. While their peers were often busy consuming financial theory, these three wealth builders were accumulating real-world knowledge. They created tight feedback loops that accelerated their learning. When something worked, they did more of it. When something failed, they quickly adjusted and moved on. This practical approach to learning provided them with insights that simply can't be gained from reading books or watching videos. Third, all three gravitated towards simple, proven strategies rather than chasing complexity. In a financial world that profits from making money management seem complicated, they focused on fundamentals that actually move the needle. They weren't trying to find exotic tax loopholes or predict market movements. They were executing basic principles with remarkable consistency. Fourth, they all created systems that removed the need for constant decision-making. Each of our wealth builders essentially automated their discipline through structures that kept them on track without requiring constant willpower. Lisa's automatic transfers, Angela's property management routines, and Mike's business operations all ran on systems that removed emotional decision points. Perhaps most importantly, they each maintained what psychologists call temporal balance, holding a long-term vision while still taking immediate action. They weren't just dreamers with grand plans for someday, nor were they short-term thinkers incapable of delayed gratification. Instead, they balanced present moves with future goals, making daily decisions that aligned with their long-term vision. What's especially interesting is how these 5 traits directly contradict conventional wisdom about wealth building. We're typically told that wealth creation requires specialized knowledge, complex strategies, and perfect timing. Yet our case studies reveal that these factors may actually be obstacles for many people. A landmark study by financial researcher Dr. Thomas Stanley, author of The Millionaire Next Door, found that most millionaires attribute their success not to sophisticated knowledge, but to basic behaviors performed consistently over time. His research revealed that most self-made millionaires scored only moderately on financial literacy tests, but exceedingly high on measures of action orientation and consistency. The conventional financial industry has a vested interest in making wealth building seem complex. The more complicated it appears, the more likely you are to pay for specialized advice or products. But our 3 wealth builders cut through this complexity with straightforward approaches that anyone can adopt. So what's the fundamental mindset shift that transforms average earners into wealth builders? It's prioritizing consistent action over perfect knowledge. It's understanding that wealth creation is more about behavior than intelligence, more about habits than information, and more about starting now than waiting for the perfect moment. The anti-expert mindset. Why questioning conventional wisdom pays off. Taking immediate action matters, but there's something even more radical about how our wealth builders approach money advice. Beneath their success lies a rebellious streak. They systematically question what financial experts claim is the right way to build wealth. And the results speak volumes. What's truly fascinating about Angela, Mike, and Lisa isn't just their success. It's their shared skepticism toward financial orthodoxy. While their peers nodded along to expert recommendations, these 3 developed a crucial skill. They filtered advice through the lens of their unique situations rather than accepting it as gospel. This selective filtering manifests differently for each of them. When Angela entered real estate, conventional wisdom declared a 20% down payment essential. Financial advisors warned that anything less meant paying private mortgage insurance, a waste of money. Yet Angela recognized that waiting years to save that perfect 20% would cost her more in missed depreciation and rental income than the insurance premiums. By questioning this standard advice, she accelerated her timeline by nearly 4 years. The experts also steered clear of problem properties, like duplexes needing renovation in transitional neighborhoods. But Angela noticed something they missed. These properties offered better cash flow potential precisely because other investors avoided them. By rejecting the expert preference for turnkey properties in established neighborhoods, she identified opportunities with dramatically better returns. Mike's rebellion against business orthodoxy proved equally valuable. When launching his landscaping company, he encountered business mentors who insisted on sophisticated marketing plans, branded vehicles, and professionally designed materials. These essentials would have required substantial startup capital. Instead, Mike focused exclusively on word-of-mouth growth, reinvesting every dollar into equipment that generated immediate revenue. While MBA-educated competitors followed textbook scaling strategies, expanding rapidly to capture market share, Mike questioned this approach. He noticed larger competitors struggling with quality control and employee turnover. Breaking with conventional business wisdom, he deliberately maintained slow, organic growth that preserved his competitive advantages, personalized service, and operational excellence. Lisa's financial heresy centered on retirement planning. Financial planners typically recommend starting with small contributions, perhaps 5 to 10% of income, gradually increasing over time. They warn against lifestyle shock from aggressive saving. Lisa rejected this gradual approach entirely, immediately directing 30% of her first teaching paycheck toward investments. Standard advice also suggested she focus on paying off student loans before serious investing. But Lisa calculated the long-term math and realized her investment returns would likely outpace her loan interest rate. She maintained minimum payments while maximizing investments, a move many advisors would have discouraged. Research supports this questioning approach. A fascinating study from the Journal of Financial Planning examined 720 households with net worths exceeding $1 million. Researchers found these wealthy individuals consulted financial advisors selectively rather than comprehensively. On average, they implemented only 37% of professional recommendations, carefully evaluating each against their personal circumstances and goals. Even more telling, a longitudinal study from Northwestern University tracked financial decision-making across 1,200 households over 15 years. Those who demonstrated healthy skepticism toward financial rules of thumb accumulated 41% more wealth than those who followed conventional wisdom without questioning. The researchers noted, financial contrarians who selectively challenge mainstream advice often identify inefficiencies that create substantial wealth-building opportunities. This doesn't mean rejecting all expert advice. Rather, our wealth builders demonstrate something more nuanced. They recognize that financial expertise is contextual. What works for the average person might not apply to their specific situation, goals, or risk tolerance. This selective approach requires more effort than simply following the crowd. You must develop your own financial judgment rather than outsourcing your thinking. But this independent evaluation creates compounding advantages over time. Each questioned assumption potentially leads to better-fitting strategies that accelerate wealth building. The Simple Money Framework, your 4-step action plan. Independent financial thinking creates those compounding advantages, but here's where things get practical. Behind the success of every wealth builder we've studied lies a surprisingly simple framework that works whether you graduated with honors or barely finished high school. These 4 steps cut through the complexity that keeps most people stuck in financial mediocrity. You might be thinking, if it's really that simple, why isn't everyone wealthy? Good question. The truth is, these steps aren't complicated to understand, but they can be psychologically challenging to implement. Our brains are wired to overthink, wait for perfection, and seek complexity where simplicity works better. Even knowing this framework, you'll feel resistance. That's normal and happens to everyone. Let's start with step 1. Start before you're ready. Remember, this isn't about reckless decisions, but about taking calculated action with the information you have now. If you're considering investing, this might mean opening an account and putting in just $100 this week, even if you're still learning about different fund options. For homebuyers, it could mean talking to a mortgage broker to understand your options, even if you're not ready to buy for a year. The magic happens when you make these moves despite feeling underprepared. One young woman I worked with was paralyzed about investing until she realized she could start with just $25 in a beginner-friendly app. That tiny action changed everything. 6 months later, she had automated $400 monthly investments without feeling overwhelmed. Your financial situation doesn't matter. There's always an appropriately sized first step. Step 2 is about creating tight feedback loops. Wealth builders don't wait years to evaluate their financial decisions. They create systems to learn quickly. This might mean reviewing your spending weekly instead of monthly, or setting 90-day checkpoints for any new financial strategy. The key is shortening the time between action and evaluation. For someone managing debt, this could mean testing different payment approaches for 3 months rather than committing to a 5-year plan immediately. For new investors, it might mean setting a calendar reminder to review performance quarterly rather than obsessing daily or ignoring it for years. The tighter your feedback loop, the faster you'll develop financial judgment that no book can teach you. Step 3. Automate your foundation. Every successful wealth builder creates systems that remove willpower from the equation. Think beyond just automatic bill payments. Consider services that round up purchases to invest spare change, apps that automatically move money to different accounts based on spending patterns, or even subscription services that handle investment rebalancing. A teacher I know set up a unique system where her bank automatically splits her paycheck 5 ways on deposit day: to retirement, regular investments, mortgage payment, bills, and spending money. She never sees the full amount, which means she never has to decide whether to save or invest. After the first month, she forgot the system was even working in the background. Finally, step 4. Build your financial tribe. The wealthiest people rarely build wealth alone. They deliberately cultivate relationships that support their financial growth. This doesn't mean you need wealthy friends. It means finding people who respect your financial goals and share some of your values. This could be joining an investment club, where you meet monthly to discuss strategies, finding an accountability partner for weekly money check-ins, or even just following content creators who normalize healthy financial behaviors. The research is clear. Your financial behavior naturally gravitates toward the 5 people you spend the most time with. The beauty of this framework is that it works regardless of your starting point. Whether you're dealing with 6 figures of student loan debt or already have some investments, these 4 steps create the foundation for consistent wealth building that doesn't require a finance degree or exceptional intelligence. That framework makes wealth building sound straightforward, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never implement it. Not because they can't understand the steps, but because they're unconsciously waiting for permission that will never come. Think about it. Who exactly are you waiting to approve your financial journey before you truly begin? I've noticed something fascinating across all our case studies. Angela, Mike, and Lisa weren't just action takers, they were permission givers. They granted themselves the authority to build wealth without waiting for external validation. Meanwhile, many highly capable people remain financially stuck because they're waiting for some invisible green light. This permission paradox explains why someone with less financial knowledge often moves ahead faster. They're not held back by the belief that they need perfect credentials or complete understanding before getting started. When Angela bought her first property, she hadn't taken a single real estate course. She simply gave herself permission to learn as she went. Our educational system inadvertently trains us to wait for authority figures to validate our knowledge. Think about it. Throughout school, we're taught that tests and grades determine our readiness to move forward. This creates a deeply ingrained pattern of seeking external qualification before taking action. Financial media reinforces this by positioning money management as something requiring specialized expertise, with headlines like 7 things you must know before investing that make you feel perpetually unprepared. Even well-meaning parents and friends contribute to this mindset. How many times have you heard someone say, "You should really talk to a professional before doing that," or "Are you sure you know enough about real estate/investing/business to make that decision?" These protective warnings create an unconscious belief that financial moves require outside approval. Research from the Journal of Economic Psychology found something surprising. Self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to succeed, predicts financial outcomes better than actual financial knowledge. The study tracked 2,400 adults over 5 years and found that those with high self-efficacy scores accumulated 23% more wealth than those with equivalent financial knowledge, but lower self-efficacy. Each of our wealth builders faced significant permission barriers. Lisa had to overcome the belief that teachers can't afford to invest substantially on modest salaries. Mike had to push past academic labels that suggested business success was beyond his capabilities. What made them different wasn't superior knowledge. It was their willingness to grant themselves permission despite these barriers. You can adopt this same mindset through simple permission statements. Instead of, I need to learn more before I start investing, try, I give myself permission to start small while I continue learning. Replace, I should wait until I have more money to think about wealth building, with, I give myself permission to start with whatever I have right now. These small shifts break the unconscious waiting pattern. What's particularly interesting is that confidence doesn't actually precede action for most successful wealth builders. Dr. Lucia Gonzalez, who studies financial behavior at Columbia University, calls this earned confidence. The realization that confidence is the result of taking action, not its prerequisite. She explains, many people wait to feel confident before investing or starting a business, but confidence actually comes from taking those initial steps and surviving them. This explains why our case studies appeared so self-assured. Their confidence wasn't something they were born with. It was built through small actions that gradually expanded their comfort zone. Each property Angela purchased made the next one feel less intimidating. Each successful client Mike served made approaching new prospects easier. Are average people actually building wealth faster than you? It's not about intelligence or education. They've simply given themselves permission to start building wealth while others wait to feel qualified enough. They understand that permission isn't something you receive, it's something you give yourself. The financial literacy myth, what really matters for building wealth. Now that you understand the power of self-permission, there's another myth we need to dismantle. What if I told you that the conventional wisdom about financial literacy has it completely backward? We've been conditioned to believe we need extensive financial knowledge before we can start building wealth. But our case studies reveal something startling about this approach. Think about it. Financial education is typically presented as a massive prerequisite. First, learn everything about investing, taxes, and financial planning. Then, and only then, should you start your wealth-building journey. But this study first, act later approach is precisely what keeps so many smart people financially stuck. Let's be honest about something uncomfortable. The financial industry benefits when money management seems complicated. Financial institutions, advisors, and even financial education companies have strong incentives to make wealth building appear more complex than it actually is. The more intimidating finance seems, the more likely you'll pay for specialized services or stay paralyzed in analysis mode. What's fascinating is that research consistently contradicts this approach. A groundbreaking study from Princeton University tracked 1,600 individuals over 7 years and found something surprising. Practical financial behaviors predicted wealth accumulation 4 times more accurately than scores on financial literacy tests. In other words, what you do matters significantly more than what you know. Our case studies exemplify this perfectly. When Angela started her real estate journey, she didn't understand cap rates, depreciation schedules, or complex tax strategies. She learned exactly one concept: positive cash flow. She made sure each property brought in more money than it cost. A fundamental principle she mastered through application, not textbooks. Mike's financial education wasn't from business school. He focused on understanding his profit margins and how to price services to ensure sustainable growth. He didn't need complex financial models. He needed to know if he was making money after expenses. This singular focus gave him clarity when more financially educated competitors got lost in unnecessary complexities. Even Lisa, who built wealth through consistent investing, didn't start with comprehensive market knowledge. She understood just 3 concepts initially: compound growth, index fund basics, and the importance of low fees. These fundamental principles, applied consistently, outperformed her colleagues who were constantly researching sophisticated strategies. This approach has a name: just-in-time learning. Instead of front-loading financial education, successful wealth builders learn specific concepts precisely when they need them for a particular decision. It's targeted, practical, and immediately applicable. Here's how you can apply this approach. If you're considering buying your first investment property, don't get lost in a course covering every aspect of real estate. Instead, learn specifically about financing options and how to calculate cash flow for that property type. If you're starting to invest, don't try to become an expert on all market dynamics. Learn just enough about index funds to make your first investment confidently. A fascinating study from Yale University compared 2 groups of first-time investors. The first received comprehensive financial education covering everything from market history to advanced strategies. The second learned only the minimum necessary to start investing in index funds. After 18 months, the second group had not only invested more consistently, but also accumulated 31% more wealth. The comprehensive education group reported feeling overwhelmed and took significantly longer to make their first investment. What's important isn't that you avoid financial education. It's that you pair learning with immediate application. The moment you learn something new about money, implement it, then learn the next relevant concept. This creates a powerful feedback loop that both builds wealth and increases your financial knowledge in a practical way. The reality is that most wealthy individuals didn't start with exceptional financial literacy. They started with action, then developed targeted financial knowledge through real-world experience. Their education was driven by specific challenges and opportunities, not abstract financial theories. Your wealth-building identity, the ultimate mindset shift. While knowledge helps, there's something more fundamental at play when it comes to wealth building. Have you ever noticed how some people seem naturally drawn to financial opportunities while others avoid them entirely, even when they have similar information? The difference often lies not in what they know, but in who they believe themselves to be. Identity-based habits are powerful forces in our financial lives. They're the difference between saying, "I should invest because it's financially smart," and "I'm the kind of person who invests automatically every month." This subtle shift transforms financial behaviors from something you occasionally force yourself to do into something that feels like a natural expression of who you are. When we look closely at Angela, Mike, and Lisa, we see that none of them started with wealth-building knowledge or backgrounds. What they did develop was a wealth builder identity. For Angela, this meant seeing herself as someone who solves property problems, not just as someone trying to make money in real estate. Mike didn't view himself as a guy with ADHD who mows lawns, but as a business owner who creates solutions for homeowners. Lisa didn't identify as a teacher who saves, but as a wealth builder who happens to teach. Research from behavioral psychologists shows that identity-based changes are far more sustainable than those driven by knowledge or even motivation. A fascinating study from the University of Pennsylvania tracked individuals making financial changes over 3 years and found that those who adopted identity-based approaches maintained their new behaviors 2.4 times longer than those using willpower or education-based approaches. How did our wealth builders maintain their identity even when faced with challenges? They used specific identity statements as mental anchors. When Angela encountered a property setback, she would remind herself, "I'm the type of person who sees opportunity in problems." Mike, when tempted to chase after trendy business strategies, would ask, "Would a focused business owner get distracted by this?" Lisa, when friends invited her to expensive outings, would think, "I'm someone who enjoys life while building wealth, not someone who trades tomorrow for today." You can begin shifting your financial identity today through small, consistent actions. Try introducing yourself, even if just in your mind, as someone with financial goals. "I'm working toward financial independence," rather than "I'm trying to save more." Start referring to yourself as an investor, even if you've only invested $25. Use phrases like, "as someone who's building wealth," when discussing financial topics. Your environment plays a crucial role in reinforcing or undermining your financial identity. A study by financial psychologists found that individuals who deliberately sought out wealth-building peer groups increased their savings rate by 27% within 6 months, without any change in income. Consider joining investment clubs, financial education communities, or even informal accountability groups where your wealth builder identity will be reinforced rather than questioned. The peer effect works because humans naturally align their behaviors with their social circle's expectations. If everyone around you spends impulsively, frugality feels like an act of rebellion. But when you connect with others who value financial growth, responsible money management becomes the normal behavior that reinforces your identity. You might be thinking that this identity shift feels fraudulent if you're not already wealthy. But remember that every wealth builder started by adopting the identity before they had the results to match. Our case studies didn't wait to feel like wealth builders. They chose to see themselves that way first, and their actions naturally followed. The 72-hour challenge. Your first step to building wealth like an average millionaire. Identity without action is just wishful thinking. Think about this. What's the difference between someone who talks about building wealth and someone who actually builds it? About 72 hours of focused action that most people aren't willing to take. Let's get real. You could be just 3 days away from completely changing your financial future. I'm serious. The wealth builders we've studied didn't spend months planning their perfect strategy. They jumped in, figured things out as they went, and let momentum carry them forward. I'm going to lay out a simple 72-hour challenge that embodies everything we've learned from Angela, Mike, and Lisa. But here's where most people get stuck. That uncomfortable feeling when it's time to actually do something. Your brain is probably already coming up with reasons why you should wait, learn more, or plan better before starting. That's normal, but it's also the exact barrier that kept Emma's money sitting in a low-interest account while Angela's portfolio multiplied. Day one is all about taking one specific financial action before you feel ready. If you've never invested before, download an investment app and set up your account with just $25. If you're drowning in credit card debt, call your highest interest card company and negotiate a lower rate. If you're interested in real estate, schedule a coffee with someone who owns rental property. The specific action matters less than breaking through that initial resistance. Here's what this might look like. A teacher in Arizona named Melissa had been thinking about investing for years, but felt overwhelmed by options. For day one, she simply opened a basic brokerage account and invested $50 in a total market index fund. That single action shifted her identity from someone who should invest someday to an investor. Day two focuses on setting up one automated system that will work without your ongoing effort. This is where you eliminate the need for willpower or remembering to take action. Set up an automatic transfer of even just $20 weekly into your investment account. Create a simple spreadsheet that tracks your spending in 3 basic categories. Program bill payments to happen automatically on payday. For example, Carlos, a graphic designer with inconsistent income, set up a system where 15% of every client payment automatically transferred to a separate savings account. This single automation helped him save $4,200 in his first year without having to make a single decision after setting it up. Day 3 is about making one connection that supports your new wealth-building identity. Tell someone about your financial goals, join an online community focused on money management, or reach out to someone who's achieved what you're working toward. This step leverages the powerful influence of social identity on financial behavior. When Jessica, a nurse practitioner, joined a Facebook group for women investors and shared her goal of saving for a rental property, she not only received encouragement, but also connected with a real estate agent who specialized in working with healthcare professionals. That single connection eventually led to her purchasing her first investment property. What makes this 72-hour sprint so powerful is how it combines the core principles from all our case studies. Taking action before you feel ready, creating systems that make consistency automatic, and building social connections that reinforce your new identity. It's not about making perfect financial moves. It's about generating momentum that can carry you forward. The beauty of this challenge is that it works regardless of your current knowledge, income, or financial situation. The concrete steps create immediate progress while bypassing the common barriers of overthinking and waiting for perfect conditions. The intelligence trap. Final thoughts on building wealth as an average person. What if being too smart is actually your biggest financial obstacle? It sounds counterintuitive, but throughout our journey exploring Angela, Mike, and Lisa's stories, we've uncovered something fascinating. Conventional intelligence and academic success don't necessarily translate to financial success. In fact, they can sometimes get in the way. Society tells us a clear story. Get good grades, earn advanced degrees, and financial success will follow. But our case studies paint a different picture. The people building wealth fastest often aren't the ones with the highest GPAs or most impressive diplomas hanging on their walls. They're the ones who take simple, consistent action while others are still analyzing the perfect approach. This intelligence trap shows up in several ways. First, there's the overthinking that plagues many intelligent people. When you're trained to consider every angle and analyze every possibility, making financial decisions becomes paralyzing. You might research investment strategies for months, while someone else simply sets up an automatic investment plan and moves forward. Perfectionism is another intelligence-related roadblock. The academic world rewards getting things exactly right, but wealth-building rewards getting things mostly right and adjusting along the way. Remember how our case studies didn't wait for perfect conditions? They started with imperfect knowledge, and learn through action. Complex strategies can be particularly appealing to intelligent people. If you excelled in academic settings, you might gravitate towards sophisticated investment approaches that seem to match your intellectual capabilities. Yet research from the University of Chicago found that individuals with higher IQs often underperform financially because they're drawn to unnecessarily complex financial products with higher fees and more moving parts. Dr. Melissa Harper, a cognitive psychologist who studies decision-making, explains, "The cognitive styles that excel in structured academic environments often struggle with the ambiguity and iteration required for wealth building. Academic success rewards having the right answer the first time, while financial success often comes from being willing to be wrong and adjust." What's particularly interesting is how our case studies succeeded not despite being average, but often because their backgrounds encouraged practical approaches. Without the expectation that they needed to be financial experts, they focused on basic principles and consistent action. They weren't trying to outsmart the market or develop revolutionary strategies. They were simply implementing proven approaches consistently over time. So how can you leverage your own cognitive style, whether traditionally smart or not, to build wealth more effectively? Start by recognizing the signs that intelligence might be getting in your way. Are you consuming financial information without taking action? Have you been researching the perfect investment strategy for months or years? Do you find yourself creating complex systems that you never fully implement? Here's a simple framework for shifting from overthinking to effective action. First, limit your research time. Give yourself a specific deadline, maybe 2 weeks, to learn the basics of any financial move before taking action. When the deadline hits, make your move, even if you don't feel completely ready. Second, embrace good enough solutions. Ask yourself, if I implement this imperfect plan now and adjust later, will I likely be better off than waiting for the perfect plan? The answer is almost always yes. Third, focus on implementation over information. For every hour you spend learning about finances, spend at least 3 hours actually implementing what you've learned. This ratio keeps you moving forward instead of getting stuck in research mode. Fourth, simplify your approach. Challenge yourself to explain your financial strategy in 1 or 2 sentences. If you can't, it's probably too complex to implement consistently. Remember, the advantage that average people often have in building wealth isn't lower intelligence. It's a willingness to take simple, consistent action instead of waiting for perfect knowledge or the ideal moment. They focus on getting started rather than getting everything right the first time. The good news, you can make this same shift starting today, regardless of your educational background or natural thinking style. By recognizing when your intelligence might be holding you back and deliberately choosing action over analysis, you can start building wealth faster than you ever thought possible. The million-dollar question, what will you do differently now? That shift from overthinking to action is where true financial transformation begins. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. When you close this video in a few minutes, will you be a wealth dreamer who learned some interesting ideas? Or will you be a wealth builder who actually did something differently? I'm asking because right now you're at a crossroads. You've just spent time learning about Angela, Mike, and Lisa. Ordinary people who built extraordinary wealth not because they were financial geniuses, but because they took action while others kept planning. And I can almost guarantee what's happening in your mind right now. You're thinking, this all makes sense. I should probably read a few more articles about this approach before I start. That thought right there? It's the exact dividing line between wealth dreamers and wealth builders. Let me share something personal. 5 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are, consuming financial content, nodding along, feeling inspired, and then doing absolutely nothing different afterward. I had a folder on my computer labeled Financial Research, with dozens of saved articles I never implemented. What finally changed everything was the day I set a 20-minute timer and opened my first investment account with just $100 while the timer was still running. That single, imperfect action did more for my financial future than all the research I'd done for years prior. So here's my challenge to you. What one financial action will you take in the next 24 hours? Not next week. Not after you've researched more. Not when you feel ready. The next 24 hours. It doesn't need to be perfect or complete. It just needs to be real. Here are some options depending on where you are right now. If you've never invested before, open an account with a low-cost brokerage and transfer $25. Don't worry about what to invest in yet. Just complete the account setup and transfer. If you're struggling with spending, delete shopping apps from your phone right now while watching this video. Then set up a separate checking account for discretionary spending. If you have debt that's overwhelming you, call just one creditor today and request a lower interest rate or modified payment plan. This 5-minute call could save thousands. If you're trying to increase your income, send a message to 3 people in your network asking if they know anyone looking for your skills as a side project. If you're feeling stuck, find one person today who's building wealth in a way you admire and send them a message asking if they'd be willing to share their experience over coffee. The specific action matters less than the fact that you're actually doing something. Because that first action creates momentum that leads to the second action, and then the third. Here's something powerful you can do. Share your commitment in the comments below. Public accountability dramatically increases follow-through rates. Plus, you'll connect with others taking similar steps, creating a financial tribe that supports your journey. Remember that single action, however small, represents a fundamental shift in your approach. It's the difference between saying, "I'm interested in building wealth," and "I am actively building wealth right now." Every wealth builder you've ever admired started with one imperfect move before they had all the answers. They didn't wait until they felt qualified or knowledgeable enough. They started and figured it out along the way. The difference between where you are now and where you want to be financially isn't about intelligence, education, or even having the perfect plan. It's about making the decision to act today with whatever information and resources you currently have. So I'll ask one more time, what financial action will you take in the next 24 hours? Not what will you learn, what will you think about, or what will you plan? What will you actually do? We've reached the end of our journey together, and the message couldn't be clearer. Wealth building isn't reserved for financial geniuses or people with fancy degrees. It's for people who understand that imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time. Look back at the stories we've shared. Our 3 wealth builders weren't extraordinary people with extraordinary advantages. They were regular folks who simply approached money differently than most. They prioritized starting before feeling ready. They learned through experience rather than endless research. They automated their good habits. And they kept things refreshingly simple. Your own wealth-building journey doesn't begin with mastering complex financial concepts or waiting for the perfect moment. It begins with one deliberate action taken today. So here's my question for you. What's that one simple money move